How's it going, guys? Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Phil Talk Sports Podcast. Myself and Nick Rice back with you again as we are down to 4. The conference championships for the NFL is this week after a crazy divisional game. We're going to talk about what we just saw. We're going to preview the conference championships. And whatever time is left, we're talking Ed Reed and Bethune-Cookman. So, Nick, I think the most important thing we need to talk about is I won a perfect 4-0 in my picks this week. You did a very respectable 3-1, which what that really means is we're tied at 8-3 for picks so far in the playoffs this year. So we're all knotted up.
Man, I to be honest, like last week, I was so nervous about what's going on, but this week I was ultra confident, especially with that game with Damar Hamlin and the Bills. And it was just a wild week. I gotta say, they might want to throw the wild card weekend, the front moniker, into wild divisional weekend with just how crazy it was this last Sunday. But I can't wait to break it down, Phil. And really, the thing I cannot wait to talk about is the Ed Reed Bethune-Cookman thing. And for folks who are just tuning into this podcast for the first time, I'm a former voice there, and obviously Phil lives very close there. So we're for people that aren't necessarily inside of the athletic rooms and on campus, I'd say we're as privy to people outside of that as anybody. So I can't wait, and I know you can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, I would like to think we're as qualified as you can be not being involved in the program. For me,
for whatever that means,
like you not anymore, and like I do baseball stuff for them, so it's not really the same thing. But we're as qualified as you can be without being part of the program, I would like to think. But before we get to that, we got to get to this stuff. So I think the fairest way to do this, we'll do the divisional games in the order in which they happen. That seems like the easiest way to do it to me. So we're going to kick it off with Jacksonville traveling to Arrowhead to take on the Chiefs. Commendable effort by the Jags. I think this went about as well as people expected it to go. Chiefs prevail 27-20. The real story there is Patrick Mahomes, a little dinged up, missed roughly a quarter of action. Former Jags quarterback Chad Henne actually led the largest Kansas City Chiefs drive in the history of the playoffs with a 98-yard drive, which kudos to him. You're a backup quarterback and you get the opportunity to help your team that way. Let's keep in mind that 98-yard drive, Chad Henne only threw for 23 yards of it. The rest was pass interference and a run. But hey, if you're a backup quarterback, you're trying to help your team, kudos to Chad Henne. If a couple things go a few different ways, a mistimed fumble by Agnew and the Jags, maybe you're looking at an upset here, but the Chiefs kind of seemed like they had this in hand pretty much the whole time. It was a little shaky when Mahomes first got hurt. I think they were more concerned about, if he's hurt past this game, but I haven't heard any news about that. So I think he might be a little banged up, but everybody is in the playoffs at this point.
Oh, yeah. He's playing next week. Mahomes in home playoff games now has 28 touchdowns and 3 picks. I'd say that's pretty good numbers for that guy. And when you think about how they controlled the clock, they moved the chains, Kansas City was pretty much in control most of the game. What's amazing is that if Henne was the quarterback the whole game, I still think the Chiefs win it, because unlike in years prior, and ironically, unlike in their Super Bowl season too, they actually have a running game that's really respectable. And I wasn't aware, even though they're in the Chargers division, just how good Isaiah Pacheco really was. He was just decent when we played him earlier in the year. But in this game, I mean, he might have been the best player. I mean, Mahomes was great. They had Kelsey as the chain mover, but Pacheco, man, that guy really is something special. When he can get it going, and next week he's got a great front 7 to go up against. If he can get it going and keep the chains moving for Mahomes, this could be a long day for that Cincy defense. They were impressive, Pacheco was, and the running game against Jacksonville.
I agree. I mean, if Henne had to play longer in that game, there's no reason to think they couldn't run the ball, even more. And if they got to throw it to Kelsey a time or two, you like your odds, even if it is Henne throwing them the ball. So, good job for them advancing to the AFC Championship. Well, they will host. The team they'll host we'll bring up later. But just really quick, great year for the Jags after 3 wins last year, division champs, crazy wild card, not to bring it up again, the wild card game. But they look like they're going to be, in a division that's going to be very winnable for them for years to come. And I think we might see some really good things from the Jags in the next couple of years. Keep in mind, Calvin Ridley is going to be on that roster next year. That's going to help them give Trevor Lawrence another option. He really matured as a quarterback, and what I still consider his real rookie year based on the circus he had last year. So just a quick, hats off to the Jags on a great year. Getting to the divisional round is definitely an accomplishment. Nobody saw that coming into the year for sure.
If you thought that Brady had it easy going in the NFC South. I'm trying to think about who would even come close to Jacksonville if they get Dougie P going and Trevor Lawrence going. Indy seems to be on the step down. Tennessee also seems to be getting older, and their quarterback you can't trust anymore. I mean, that division is absolutely winnable for years if they keep this up.
Right. I think Tennessee's a move or two or three from being competitive. I think if Indy were to get the quarterback right finally, even remotely right, they'd be okay. But then Houston is a mess. So for now, it is Jacksonville and everybody else. That's for sure. So I sat here on the last episode and I gave myself a confidence level for the Eagles against the Giants, a 7 out of 10. Turns out it could have been a 17 out of 10 as they
Should have
wiped
been.
the floor with the Giants 38-7 on the anniversary of the NFC Championship game against the Vikings with the same score of 38-7. Make what you will about that. But this, not only did they dominate the Giants, it didn't look like they had to try too hard. It was very interesting. Like Hurts went out there and ran a bit, but he didn't really get hit. Our third string running back went over 100 yards rushing. AJ Brown got a little dinged up, so he didn't have the game that he probably would have liked. But more than enough. Like, was it Hurts only threw for, was it 154 yards? He had 2 touchdowns, and that was more than enough. So it's crazy to think about how much closer this game was when the backups were in. Obviously, the Eagles had a much more vanilla game plan going into this, but like I'm pleasantly surprised. I thought they'd win 31-21. I think that was around the score I would give, but I was very shocked how much they just ran over Daniel Jones. All that good talk we've had about Daniel Jones is kind of out the window now because he looked horrible in this game.
Well, as you know, I don't follow you on Twitter, but
Of
if
course
I
not.
did, if I did, I would have seen Kenneth Gainwell. If he can run through you like he did,
Yeah.
then you should pack it up and go home. And that
Right.
was that was the Giants in a nutshell. That thing was over before it even got started. I anticipated the Vikings to be in that spot, as did you going into this week, because we knew the Giants were legit and Minnesota had a somewhat fraudulent 13-win season considering their point differential and the way they won some of those
Sure.
games. It was like kudos to them. But anyways, we thought that they could beat the Giants at least, but the Giants proved to be a little better than we thought. But that seemed to be their Super Bowl, and they came out flat. Brian Daboll is a great coach for the Giants, but man, I was really shocked how flat his team was this weekend.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily all doom and gloom in New York, but they are not as close as they maybe thought they were going into that game. But for Gainwell to go over 100 yards, Miles Sanders had like 90 yards. Boston Scott got in the end zone, his 11th touchdown against the Giants in 9 games. It's funny when a
Yeah.
5'6" guy can be called the Giant Killer, but it's for that
Oh,
exact reason. And it's everything seemed to work. And again, they didn't really have to try too much. I think they left plenty in the backpack for the NFC Championship game. So again, we didn't see anywhere near this full playbook. Sirianni was messing around. He faked going for 2. He showed a fake punt formation and then went back to just to give whoever they were going to play next something to think about. And I think that worked to perfection. So if they didn't have momentum going into the playoffs because they lost 2 of the last 3 and the Minshew thing didn't work out the way they wanted and Hurts maybe wasn't quite right, and all the injuries they had, they got all the momentum back from this game. This was everything you could want going into a conference championship game that you will host.
yeah, it's got to feel pretty good. That New Jersey Fletcher Cox looks nice and shiny, Phil. I gotta
Yeah,
say,
I knew things should have been good because I didn't think I was going to get it in time for the game, and it literally showed up the day of the game, so that
that
worked
is
out
so
beautifully.
cool.
It was one of those deals where like you look up your tracking and they don't update the tracking, and then it just shows up at your doorstep. It's like we don't know
Right.
dispatch.
And then they
This
update you that, oh, it's already there. And
Yeah,
it's like,
thanks. I'm
thanks.
wearing it and I get the notification that, oh yeah, by the way, we delivered your package. Thanks guys.
That's
But hey,
awesome.
it got here in time, so I can't even complain about that. Any
Right.
last thoughts on this before we move on?
Well, fittingly, just the last thought. By this stage of the NFL, and it's easy to get enamored by quarterback play and great play out wide, but it's one up front, offense and defensive line. Fittingly, Fletcher Cox, part of a Super Bowl championship D line with Brandon Graham and all them they had a couple years ago. Similar story there. We saw Sirianni during the year fortify the offense or defensive line, bringing in a couple of free agents to bolster that group. And then the offensive line might be the best in the game with Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson. So Philly's going to be, if they can keep a lot of those guys intact, they're going to be a good team for a while, no matter who they have, filling out the rest of the team. That offensive line literally dictated the game this weekend against the Giants. Very impressive from them up front.
Yeah, I mean, you can't talk about the Eagles without talking about the line play. Offensive line, you saw the clip of Jason Kelsey just one hand pancaking guys away. This defensive line had the third most sacks in the history of the NFL in the regular season. Multiple guys, I think 3 or 4 guys in double-digit sacks. That's from the D-line to the linebackers. Hassan Reddick has been a problem since he showed up in Philly, which is really cool for him because he played at Temple. So to come back to his hometown in the pros, and he's showing out absolute madness. So that's a little bit farther back from the line, obviously, but offense, defensive line, it shows that when you can get those right, you can have fun with the other stuff because that consistency is going to be there.
Absolutely. I believe it's the Eagles are the first team in NFL history to have 3 guys with 10 sacks.
Yes,
as well. So that's not
even past those guys, like Fletcher Cox has like 7. So there's guys that are like flirting with that double-digit mark outside the guys that actually got there. So it's crazy. Next, we'll go to the one game that we disagreed on. This is how I was able to tie it up with you. And we both admitted when we made these picks that we weren't super confident because it could have gone either way. Cincinnati at Buffalo. And I think people forgot to tell the Bills that they were the team that was supposed to be comfortable in the snow because they did not look right this entire game. Yeah. And I get it snows in Ohio, so it shouldn't be a total shock. But, man, this was – if you told me since he won, I wouldn't be shocked. I picked the Bengals for what it's worth. But this score actually didn't even dictate how much of a blowout this game really was. The Bills were never really in it. They played flat like they've won 4 Super Bowls and are just kind of over it, and they haven't done any of that yet. And this was after being a coin flip away from going to the Super Bowl and beating the Chiefs last year. This was an embarrassing, I got to say, performance by the Bills here. And like the Bengals are good, and Joe Burrow might be that guy if he's able to beat Mahomes 2 years in a row in a playoff situation. When you're talking best quarterbacks in the league, you might have to inch him up until he might hold the belt until Mahomes comes and grabs it from him. But this was shocking the way it went down.
Yeah, actually, that was the conversation I wanted to bring up a little later. But yeah, that quarterback battle, I tell you, and first of all, what is embarrassing, like you mentioned, not only did Bengals won the way they did, but they went into the game saying, this is ridiculous. You better get it right with the tickets to Atlanta already beginning to get sold. Mm-hmm. Logistically, you gotta have that stuff there at some point, Sure. So they were creating like a MJ. I can't believe he challenged me. I'm gonna take it out on the whole league now. Right. Figuring out a way to get pissed off over something. But yeah, they went into the game saying we're the class of the AFC. I don't get why people don't think we're the favorites. And the Bills, seeing all that, only put up 10 points and got completely humiliated up front. I was shocked. Along with the Damar Hamlin factor playing the team that
I really thought that would play a bigger role than it did.
But maybe it did. Maybe they just were they psyched themselves out too much and they weren't ready for this one.
I mean, it's probably very emotionally draining. I don't think anybody that wore a Bills uniform would ever use that as an excuse. But I'm sure, they've gone through stuff emotionally that we can only fathom. The Bengals got a taste of that, you got to think, though, because they were on the field when that happened, of course. But as far as the Bengals, bringing up the ticket sales and you better get a refund, as well as I do, these guys will use anything they can as motivation. Look at Stetson Bennett saying, like, oh, they said we were going to go 6-6 after winning the time. Actually, nobody said that, Stetson. Absolutely nobody. Find me one person that said that, and you can't. So sometimes I think they just find things. And, hey, if it works, it works. And, it was just funny to hear the, hope you get your refunds. And, things like that. Like the Jags were selling playoff tickets. Before I went to the game against the Titans, those tickets were on sale. Same thing. Like, if they don't make it, they just refund you. No big deal. No harm, no foul. But it's funny how often that actually happens, the pre-sale type thing. But it's just funny how the Bengals, like, it would have been really weird to have that game in a neutral site. And I heard the NFL was gonna, if it happened, they would do more research into, maybe the conference title games should always be in neutral sites, and nobody wants that. And now obviously that conversation will have to wait for another odd situation like that to happen. Hopefully, we never get into one of those situations again, based on what it took to even bring it up this time. So
Yeah.
hopefully, neutral site conference title games are put to bed, at least for now. So that is all the. Oh, that's 3 of the 4 divisional round. Any lasting things on Cincinnati Buffalo?
Well, I'd love we'll talk I'm sure conference titles.
Yep.
The Mahomes Burrow thing.
Yeah, we'll
That
get
is
to that.
fascinating. We'll bring that up later.
So the last game of the divisional round, you can set your watch to it because it's happened 2 years in a row. The 49ers outlast the Dallas Cowboys 19-12. And Dak just goes out there and lays another egg. I got to say, I will say this. The 49ers have looked awesome since Brock Purdy's took over. This has been the most down to earth performance they've had, but it was still
Yeah.
enough to beat the Cowboys on this night.
Yeah, well, congratulations, Dallas. You are a new NFL record holder. 7 straight divisional playoff appearances. They've lost all of them. No team in the history of the game has ever done that. Congratulations, Dallas Cowboys. Are we surprised? No,
No.
we are not surprised. Now, if Dallas played anybody else, outside of Philly, but anybody else, you name them in the playoffs, which was why I actually was tossing and turning a bit on this game. I initially felt Dallas would win it, but then in the end, I just felt the Cowboys are going to do what the Cowboys do.
Yep.
Dallas took a 6-3 lead late in the first quarter.
Missed the
They
extra
had,
point.
yeah, of course. They
Mhm.
had 7. This time, not all his fault though, but
Sure.
7 drives, 6 points in 7 drives. This is a
Mhm.
team that averaged 28 a game. So the lights shine brighter in Dallas or in San Francisco apparently, and the Cowboys were ready for it. And to me, that was coaching in certain important spots. Not all the way. Players got to play, they got to win. But when you are that last play of the game was a disaster. But when you're in your own end, 3 minutes left, punting the ball, head scratching decision, when you've got guys not dragging their foot in out of bounds on that last drive, that was perplexing.
That looked like a Madden glitch. One of those where it's
Right.
just you get stuck in an animation that yeah, that's what that looked like to me from Schultz.
And then when you have your running back hiking the ball to the quarterback, I just got to say, Mike McCarthy's different. And in some ways, I think he is hurting this team in certain spots because yet again, they just look like a totally different team when they play the big guys.
You had the great stat that they've 0-7 in their last 7 divisional rounds, and I'm sure you researched that stat and made sure it was true. I didn't do any research on this, but I'm willing to wager a large amount of money that the Cowboys are the first team to ever put their running back in at center in a playoff game. I'm willing to wager in the modern era, as we like to say, that's probably the first time that's happened. And here's the thing:
Yeah.
I understand the concept of what they were going for, and let's not lose sight on it was a decent snap by Zeke. We forgot about it because he got mauled over like an 18-wheeler
Yep.
immediately after. But these one center to another, decent snap. Just want to say
As a how many time champion are you, Phil?
that would be twice. That would be twice.
Oh,
Back to
okay.
back South Daytona flag football champions over here.
There's only so much room in your back wall over there to put
Exactly.
trophies. You already got a couple belts there. I see you. But
Yeah, I'd win more,
um,
but it wouldn't be fair.
absolutely. But yeah, this is a team that scores 28 a game, biggest game of the season. And it begs the question, 2 things. 1, Mike McCarthy, and 2, Dak Prescott. Are they guys that can help you win big in the playoffs? And I think we have enough of a sample size. With Dak's best year being his rookie year,
Right.
he's now almost 10 years in the league. And then Mike McCarthy, his best year was in 2010. I'd say with both, the answer is no. You can win a lot of regular season games with both of those guys. I mean, but one of the worst things to be in the NFL is average. And with Dak and with Mike McCarthy, I think both in their profession are just average, not bad,
Yeah.
but not good enough to win big. And when you're in Dallas, with the spotlight on, unfortunately, that's not going to get it done.
So here's the thing. They can't get rid of Dak. He's making too much money. If they are going to make some changes, it's going to be McCarthy. I don't know that that's the answer. I don't know if that's where they go here. But if they are going to make a change, it's going to be a coach before it's at quarterback.
Imagine Sean Payton there next year with Dak Prescott. Could he get more out of that? That would be a fascinating story for sure.
That would be. I do want to bring up, because we put him through the ringer, no pun intended, last episode. But like Dallas's kicker, he misses the extra point, and I start thinking, I'm like, wouldn't that be some shit if that is the difference maker? If they lose this game 17-16 or something, right? But I can honestly say because he made a field goal shorter than an extra point, and then he actually hit a 41-yarder later in the game. So he did
Mhm.
straighten out, and I think we can sit here and admit that missed extra point didn't really factor into the end of the game. You can't really hang it on that.
Yeah, these are humans at the end of the day for sure. And I'm happy for him that that field goal actually tied the game in what looked to be a game coming down to field goals.
Right.
Obviously, the Niners scored a touchdown later with McCaffrey, but
Mm,
good to see him get back on his feet. I mean, as much as we criticize, as much as we evaluate, that's what we do here. We also are humans. We want to make sure that guys are all right.
right.
And glad to see Brett Maher make up for his miscues last week.
Yeah, I don't know that he'll be back in a Dallas uniform next year, but he can say he made his final kick with the team if that is how that goes, for what that's worth.
Right.
So sitting here in my new Fletcher Cox jersey watching this game, I'm obviously thinking who would I rather the Eagles play, right? And I went back and forth on it a lot because I felt like we matched up better with Dallas. Although, like I said, San Francisco looked more human in this game than they have in the past 9 weeks or whatever it's been. Uh,
Mhm.
Overall, I still didn't want Dallas to make an NFC Championship game. I didn't want to the even if it's 5% chance, the chance of Dallas beating the Eagles in Philly to go to the Super Bowl is something I cannot stomach. If we lose to the Niners next week, I will stomach it. It'll take me a
Yeah.
minute. I'm gonna be pissed off for an hour, but I'll deal with it. The sun will come out tomorrow, right? It's not coming out tomorrow if it was Dallas.
Nope. Not
So
at all.
overall, this worked out better for me. I'm scared to death of these Niners, though, man. I'm fully going to admit, again, if we get this version of the Niners that play the Cowboys, I will like our chances. Our D line can eat him alive. He's mobile, but not that mobile. Brock Purdy, I'm talking about. If this is the version we get, I like. A Jags player had a quote earlier when they were trying to make the playoffs. Says, I don't like our odds, but I like our chances, and that's kind of how I feel about this because I think if you line up the rosters, like they're pretty even. There's firepower on both sides of the ball, and
Exactly.
they got the tight end, we got the linebacker, we got the wide receivers, they got the corners. Everything works
Mhm.
out that way. They got the running back, we got the good D line. Everything kind of checkmates itself. It might come down to coaching, and Sirianni has been great. He's a little inexperienced, but Shanahan has had his demons of closing out big games, so even that checkmates a little bit. So I'm obviously when it comes to time to pick this game right now. I can't not pick Philly. I'm picking Philly all the way. I will give it a 6 out of 10 confidence level because the wild card factor will be that it is at the link. They're not in San Francisco. It will be cold, and even Kittle has said that'll be a factor. He said it'll be cold and it'll be violent, and he's absolutely right about that. So this is going to be a bloodbath. I'm glad it's the early game, so I don't have to sit around all day and wait for this. So I'm glad
Right.
it's the 3 o'clock game, and hopefully it's snowy and it's cold and it does everything it needs to do to take guys like Kittle and McCaffrey, who's a California guy himself, out of the equation a little bit. No matter what happens, though, like Brock Purdy needs to be their guy next year because clearly things are working for him. But obviously I would be crazy to not pick my own team here. So going Philly.
Yeah, well, San Francisco proved that they can go into the cold, go into the hostile condition across the country and win. They did that against the Packers for whatever that's worth
Sure.
in the NFC playoffs just recently. The quarterback situation is an interesting one. It's Jalen Hurts and Brock Purdy, and while Hurts has played longer, it still feels with both guys we are pretty sure who they are, but not entirely familiar with who they are. We believe, Hurts is progressing, but we're still waiting for that big moment where that kind of defines him. And we understand this is who he is as a quarterback. Last week, he did not get a chance to do that, really. So, man, just the only thing that has me thinking Eagles now is that you mentioned confidence level 6 out of 10. Seems the lower you go, the more likelihood the Eagles are to win. This is quite the toss-up, man. I got to say, both very, very good football teams. Of the two games, I am 50-50 on this one versus the other one.
For what it's worth, these two quarterbacks faced off in college in 2019 during Jalen Hurts' year at Oklahoma. They combined for 11 touchdowns, and Oklahoma survived a late surge by Iowa State, 42-41. So that's the only other
Wow.
time these guys have faced each other. So could be some fireworks. Could be some fireworks. So did you give a pick there, or are you just kind of running the fence?
I'm running the clock, baby. We're out of
Yeah.
time soon. So I also looked up last year. Niners beat the Eagles 17-11 when they played last year. Hurts
Mhm.
against Jimmy G. Hurts was not very good, 12 for
Nope.
23, no touchdowns. Jimmy G was just good enough to win with one score. I'd say San Fran is better, and I believe Philadelphia improved drastically from last year. Um, I hate for the sake of the show, somebody's got to be a winner on predictions, but I'm going with you. I think, and this is going to hurt the folks in my community who love the Niners, including my own pops. But I'm going Philly. I think the Eagles get it done, and I think they're off to the Super Bowl again.
How's what's your dad's opinion? Is he confident? Is he what's
Well,
the scene at
listen, my
Rice's
dad's
opinion?
name is Jerry Rice,
Of course,
so
yeah.
yeah, he's a little lighter than the official, the newly minted one, but
Probably has a
he
smaller chain too.
right. You
Yeah.
know, the what's funny, he actually mentioned a intriguing quote in last week's playoff game when they had a timeout for San Francisco when they were up late and driving, to milk the clock. And the officials were talking about the timeout, saying, I wonder if Brock Purdy's trying to figure out they're trying to figure out a game plan for Purdy late, and they were saying no, they're actually trying to make sure the band's not on the field,
Yeah,
which
I
I
did
thought
hear
was a
that.
pretty
I did hear that. That was
it,
fantastic.
it was pretty cool. Brock Purdy's ready for the moment though, and like that's he's probably no Joe Montana. Too early to tell, of course, but just like a lot of other guys, man, he is like this is the first time in a while that my dad is that excited for a quarterback because he really is something special.
It is crazy to think because, like, when you think of the Niners, you think of Jerry Rice, no relation, Montana, Young, Roger Craig, those guys, and you kind of think that the Niners have fallen off since then, and they have because there's nowhere to go but down when you're that good. But
Exactly.
if they win this weekend, they'll have been into their third Super Bowl in a 10-year span, so 8-year span. So like they're still battling as like one of the best teams in the NFC after
Mhm.
about a decade of kind of being mediocre in the Torrey Smith era or whatever it was. So like the Niners have always, John Lynch is a big part of that in the front office, and they're just a well put together organization for sure. So the next game, the AFC Championship game, this is not only for a trip to the Super Bowl. We kind of hinted at this. Whatever quarterback leaves this game is going to have the championship belt of best quarterback in the league, at least for the time
Absolutely.
being. Even if,
Absolutely.
let's say it's Burrow, if it's Burrow, it's because I think Mahomes has the belt right now. I think we can agree. But if Burrow wins this, he will be the best quarterback in the league. And even if either of these guys lose to insert NFC quarterback here, I don't think it takes the belt away from them. That just means they had the best team that year. So
Yeah.
this one is like we all flash back to Kansas City beating, or I'm sorry, Cincy beating Kansas City in Arrowhead last year.
Coming
Uh,
back down 21. Yeah.
I really can't bet against Joe Burrow, but I can't help but think Kansas City, if they have any like balls at all, they can't let it happen twice in a row, is my
Yep.
opinion. So I have to go the Chiefs here just because I can't imagine they're gonna let that happen. If it does, they're gonna be looking like Buffalo. Like, wow, they had this wide open window that shut really quick, and at least they got one ring out of it instead of here's the dynasty, whereas the Bills haven't gotten any so far. So like I'm picking them off the concept of like they just can't let it happen again. Not because I don't think Burrow can go in there and win, because we've seen it happen, and based on how they treated Buffalo in the snow, could easily happen again. But like you said, someone's got to win these picks, so you got to go out on a limb a little bit.
Yeah, Vegas actually feels the same way. They have the Chiefs favored by 1.5. And usually a home team, if
It's
both are
three.
they view even as three.
Yeah.
So that is very interesting.
Real
And
quick, while you bring up the spread, the Eagles are favored by 2.5. So again, that's just a
oh,
tad lower than your normal home field advantage. So go on.
right. Somebody's gonna have the lead at the end of this weekend because I'll go Cincinnati. I do not feel confident at all, but I'm going Bengals. We are matched with the Eagles, but I was very impressed by what I saw last week against Buffalo. For them to gain 30 first downs and control the line of scrimmage like they did against the Bills in their building last week, I think Cincinnati's a team of destiny, and I think Joe Mixon was right. They are the class of the AFC. I'm taking the Bengals in a narrow upset.
Yeah, so like if they make it, man, they like you would think winning the Super Bowl is obviously the ultimate goal, but like they would have a stranglehold on the AFC to go back to back, and like only 6 quarterbacks have ever made it back to the Super Bowl after losing their debut Super Bowl appearance, and none of them
Mhm.
have won rings at that point. So if you lose your first Super Bowl, history tells you don't end up winning one in your career, which is
Yep.
really, it's the cold hard facts. But Burrow could be the guy to break that trend.
That is a very interesting fact,
It
actually.
is. I gotta find the article because I want to read the 6 guys that have at least done it. And they make sense when you think of like who they were and whatnot. But I guess maybe John Elway was the only one that's lost his first
Yeah.
one and then won, so he'd be the only one. But yeah, you don't feel good picking either of these guys because the guys on the other side are just that good, and we can get into like all the individual other players, but this is going to be billed as Burrow versus Mahomes round 2, and that's exactly what we're going to get. So we neither of us feel super confident, but could easily happen either way for sure.
The Bengals have won 3 straight against the Chiefs, playoffs and regular season. So, man, I got to say, this is going to be a pretty cool matchup.
Definitely looking forward to it, and the Chiefs are at the point where they I don't know if Mahomes' health is going to be a factor at all. I guess we're going to find out if he gets hit once and is hobbling like he was against the Jags. Like that's going to throw things off completely. But assuming he's healthy, this is going to be some fireworks for sure. So we got a little bit of time left. Like I said, normally we try and sneak 2 or 3 topics here at the end, but we're going to allot all the time we have left to the Ed Reed Bethune-Cookman story. Last episode, we said we'd bring it up again if there was any news on the thing. We did not expect it to be this quick. Ed Reed has been dismissed from his position as head football coach of Bethune-Cookman after 20 days on the job. Never even got to coach a practice. Never blew a whistle due to the way like scheduling is. There's no practice time in the NCAA during this time. Uh, we all talked about the video last time, and real quick, I want to share if I can pull this screen share off in a quick fashion. Let's see. They actually had a
All
rally
right, John
today.
Madden at work here.
Yeah.
Okay,
Am I in it? Okay, so you guys see this? Yeah. Okay, so this is
there we go.
actually at Cookman. Oh, if there's no sound, so basically there's been a what you call it, like a rally type thing. Players are out there yelling, "We want our coach back." That the guy in the video is a Bethune Cookman tight end whose name I can't pronounce if I'm being fully honest. But players are out there, students are out there in general, and it's
Yeah.
just very strange that like it's strange
Yeah,
on both
students are
accounts.
walking out of class, by the way.
Yeah, because it's strange on both accounts. Because people can make the argument like Ed Reed didn't even visit the school before taking the job, but he also took the job knowing that there needs to be a lot of change here, and he's trying to make the change, and the school doesn't want the change. And I'm sure you've been following just as much as me. We've sent content back and forth. I think what it comes down to is like you knew this guy needed to make change, and change is not easy. So you shouldn't have been shocked that you were going to hit speed bumps when this guy's trying
Right,
to make
right,
change.
right, right.
I definitely lean towards Ed Reed, but we don't know
Mhm.
the other side. We
And
barely
they're
know
not
Ed's
talking
side.
right now.
Nobody's really like Ed's talking, but he's not saying much.
Yeah. 20 players also signed a petition, over 20, to reinstate Ed Reed. To me, this goes beyond just like the guys walking out. I think the students are saying, look, um, with the players, they feel okay. This was a high profile guy that could bring in extra recruits. We could win games, but I think the people walking out, for as much as I understand, obviously not being exactly on campus, so we are speaking opinions here. But
Yeah.
this is a situation where I think the students are saying, look, we actually kind of second Ed Reed's opinions, and we think this might not be the cleanest, most well run campus among all HBCUs or among a lot of campuses in the state. So I think it's more about that. And with that Reed, it kind of just began that conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it is like the other side of the argument. This is what I mean is like there's definitely parts of Florida, especially in this area, that are like still getting cleaned up from the hurricanes that we had 3 months ago. That's how much damage, and I'm sure that's some of it. But Ed Reed's talking about like they've bought up buildings literally just to store crap in, like uses they were supposed to turn it into
Mm,
something positive for the campus, and it's just used as storage. So clearly,
right.
like this is beyond football, and like I think Ed Reed being there, it came as a surprise in the first place that there was no, it just kind of happened. There was no like journalism, like, oh, these talks are happening, this might happen. You just got a graphic one day that it happened. So it really
Yeah.
came out of nowhere. And then Ed Reed did the whole "I'm not even under contract yet" sort of thing. So it's been very strange. This whole from day one, it's been strange. And the past 20 have just been crazy.
Yeah, so we also need to make clear that HBCUs and Bethune-Cookman in particular is not the only school that has problems.
Of
That
course not.
has
Yeah.
maybe there's like different places that are dirty, or maybe places aren't well run, or maybe places don't pay enough. But to me, with who Ed Reed is, and actually I heard one thing I'd like to bring up also. When the
Mhm.
Ravens first brought in Ed Reed, he was notorious for that, keeping a clean locker room, keeping a clean, workspace. So this is kind of part of the course with him. But
Yeah.
I think based on everything that's happened and the reaction following him getting let go, I think Ed Reed was probably close to spot on. And based on what I've noticed, I think Bethune Cookman to some degree was frustrated that this stuff got out. And granted, companies don't want to lose a bunch of money by having negative publicity. They might have been concerned that Ed Reed won't stop. We don't know if Ed Reed said, look, if you want me, you're going to deal with me talking and exposing
Yeah.
everything that I see. So we don't know that aspect of it. But based on what we know, I think Ed Reed was a little too much for them to handle right now. And I think Bethune Cookman was lucky that he was willing to go there. And I think the drawbacks of him talking too much, and the drawbacks, maybe not the way they'd like to, and the drawbacks of maybe having to pay him more than another coach without as big of a profile. To me,
Mhm.
that is worth the headache. Him and what he brings to the table, and the potential of transfers, and all of the great publicity they get from him. I think that is worth the headache, and
I
I
mean,
think they really missed an opportunity.
I said it last time. He didn't. There's no way he took that job for the money. So I don't know that that's really the issue. I'm interested to see if any of this results in like him maybe being reinstated. I think that's a long shot, but we'll have to remain and see. If there's more on this story, we're obviously going to bring it up in our next couple episodes coming up here, but we are unfortunately out of time. So I want to thank you guys for listening to this episode. Enjoy conference championship weekend, and we'll see you next time. Go Birds.